The town of Cold Pines was quiet, peaceful. Then came the screams. Thomas Hooper, the quiet librarian, shattered the peace. He brutally attacked his neighbors, claimed they were vessels, tools for the void. Hooper's trial became a spectacle, a small town facing unimaginable horror. His only defense? The void made him do it. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, locals, everyone wondering the same thing. Was Thomas Hooper mad, or was something truly evil at play? The tension was thick. A cold dread settled over everyone as Hooper spoke. His voice was flat, empty, like a grave speaking. Hooper sat in the stand, eyes hollow. His gaze seemed to pierce through the very fabric of the courtroom, as if he was looking into another realm entirely. The room was filled with an uneasy silence, the kind that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. He spoke of the void, a place of unimaginable darkness and despair. His voice trembled as he described it, each word dripping with fear and uncertainty. A whispering darkness that invaded his mind. It was as if the shadows themselves had come to life, whispering secrets and promises that no mortal should ever hear. Told him to cleanse the town. His words were chilling. He recounted how the void had shown him visions of a town consumed by darkness, a place where no light could penetrate. He described the void's voice, insistent, demanding. It was a voice that promised power, but at a terrible cost, a voice that would not be ignored, promising power in exchange for obedience. The allure of such power was almost too much to resist, but the price was steep. Obedience to a force that sought only destruction.
The void, it whispered to me. It told me things, showed me things that no human should ever see. It was like a dark, insidious presence that had taken root in my very soul, told me they were vessels, tools for the cleansing. The people of the town were nothing more than pawns in a game of cosmic horror, their lives insignificant in the grand scheme of things.
The jury listened, captivated and horrified, their faces a mix of disbelief and fear, as if they too could feel the presence of the void creeping into their minds. Hooper recounted his descent into madness, each word a step deeper into the abyss, each sentence a further unraveling of his sanity, the growing influence of the void. It was a force that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day, its tendrils reaching further into his mind, his own struggle for control. It was a battle he was losing, a fight against an enemy that could not be seen or touched, but was always there. His words painted a terrifying picture, a world where darkness reigned supreme and the light was but a distant memory. Was it the rambling of a madman, or a terrifying truth that nobody wanted to believe? The courtroom was left to ponder this question, the weight of Hooper's words hanging heavy in the air. Dr. Peter Sampson, a renowned psychiatrist, took the stand. He had examined Hooper. His conclusion, paranoid schizophrenia, a break from reality. This diagnosis was not made lightly. It was the result of extensive evaluations and numerous sessions with Hooper. Dr. Sampson had delved deep into Hooper's psyche, uncovering layers of trauma and delusion that had built up over years. The void, Dr. Sampson explained, was a delusion. It was a manifestation of Hooper's deepest fears and anxieties, a place where his mind retreated when reality became too unbearable. This void was not just an empty space. It was filled with the echoes of Hooper's past, his regrets, and his unfulfilled desires, a figment of Hooper's broken mind. His perception of reality had been so distorted that he could no longer distinguish between what was real and what was imagined. This break from reality was not sudden, but a gradual descent into madness. His crimes, a tragic consequence of mental illness. The acts he committed were not out of malice, but out of a desperate attempt to make sense of the chaos in his mind. The community was left grappling with the aftermath, trying to understand how such horror could stem from one man's suffering.
Hooper's history shows clear signs of a mind unraveling. Insomnia, anxiety, increasing isolation. These were not just isolated incidents, but part of a larger pattern of deteriorating mental health. Each symptom was a cry for help, a signal that something was terribly wrong. These are symptoms of a severe mental illness. They indicate a person struggling to maintain a grip on reality, someone who is slowly losing the battle against their inner demons. The signs were there, but they were either ignored or misunderstood.
Sampson spoke with authority. His years of experience and deep understanding of the human mind lent weight to his words. He was not just presenting a diagnosis. He was telling the story of a man who had been failed by the system. He presented Hooper's history of insomnia, anxiety, and increasing isolation. Each entry in the medical records was a testament to Hooper's struggle, a piece of the puzzle that explained his tragic actions. Clear signs of a mind unraveling. The evidence was overwhelming, painting a picture of a man who had been in a downward spiral for years. His mental state had deteriorated to the point where he could no longer function in society. The courtroom listened intently. Was this the answer? Could understanding Hooper's mental illness provide the closure the community so desperately needed? The jurors were faced with the difficult task of separating the man from his actions. A simple, if tragic, explanation for the horror that had gripped their town. The community had been searching for answers, and now they were confronted with the harsh reality of mental illness. It was a sobering reminder of the fragility of the human mind and the importance of compassion and understanding. The defense called a different kind of expert. Dr. Emily Carter, a paranormal investigator, specialized in unexplained phenomena. Her testimony sent chills down everyone's spines.
There are ancient forces, dark entities that can influence the minds of men. I believe Hooper's void could be real.
She spoke of similar cases, people driven to violence by unseen forces. Her words hung in the air, unsettling and impossible to dismiss. Could Hooper truly be a puppet, controlled by something ancient and evil? The courtroom sat on edge, caught between skepticism and creeping terror. Father Michael O'Brien, a respected theologian, offered a different perspective.
He spoke of demonic possession, of evil entities seeking to corrupt the souls of men.
He argued Hooper's void could be a demon.
Its whispers, a temptation leading to violence and despair.
Father O'Brien spoke with quiet conviction. He described the ancient battle between good and evil.
He warned that darkness could take many forms.
The courtroom was silent. Hooper's case was no longer just about madness or sanity. It had become a battleground of faith. A chilling reminder of the unseen forces that might lurk in the shadows.
The void demands silence.
As the trial progressed, Hooper's behavior grew more erratic. His once composed demeanor began to crumble, revealing a man on the edge of sanity. The courtroom, once a place of order and justice, became a stage for his unraveling. He muttered to himself, eyes darting around the courtroom as if he saw things others couldn't. His whispers were incoherent, filled with fragments of thoughts that made little sense to those around him. It was as if he was conversing with unseen entities, trapped in a dialogue only he could hear. His outbursts became more frequent. What started as occasional murmurs escalated into full-blown tirades. The courtroom echoed with his cries, each one more desperate than the last. He would shout at the judge, the jury, even the empty gallery. His accusations were wild, his anger palpable. He seemed to believe that everyone was part of a grand conspiracy against him. Each outburst filled the room with a palpable sense of dread. The spectators, once curious, now watched in horror as Hooper descended further into madness. The air grew thick with tension, and an unspoken fear spread among those present.
The void is speaking to me. It grows angrier with each passing day. The voices, once mere whispers, had become deafening roars in his mind. He clutched his head, trying to block out the relentless noise, but it was futile.
The whispers he'd once described grew into shouts. They were no longer just in his head. They seemed to reverberate through the very walls of the courtroom. The void, as he called it, was no longer a distant presence, but a looming force. He claimed the void was speaking to him, growing angrier with each passing day of the trial. His proclamations were met with skepticism, but the fear in his eyes was undeniable. It was as if he was being consumed from within. The line between reality and delusion blurred. Hooper's grip on sanity was slipping, and it was unclear whether he was a victim of his own mind or something far more sinister. His reflection in the mirror seemed to mock him, a distorted version of the man he once was. Was Hooper truly losing his mind? Or was there a darker force at play, manipulating his thoughts and actions? The courtroom was left to ponder these questions, as the man before them became a shadow of his former self. Or was the void tightening its grip, preparing for something terrible? The atmosphere grew heavier with each passing moment, as if the very air was charged with impending doom. The trial was no longer just about justice. It was a battle for Hooper's soul.
The void demands silence.
The climax came during closing arguments. Hooper, in a terrifying display of rage, leaped from his seat. He screamed, "The void demands silence!" He lunged at the jury, eyes wild with madness. Bailiffs tackled him, struggling to restrain his unexpected strength. The courtroom erupted in chaos. People screamed, fleeing for the exits. The judge pounded his gavel, his voice lost in the pandemonium. In that moment of terror, Hooper's claims seemed all too real. The void, it seemed, had made its presence known. But was it a demonic entity, a figment of madness, or something else entirely? The jury, visibly shaken, delivered their verdict guilty. Hooper, deemed mentally unfit for trial, was sentenced to life in a psychiatric facility. The town of Cold Pines slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the fear remained. The memory of Hooper's chilling testimony lingered like a shadow. Was Thomas Hooper merely a madman, or had he been a conduit for something ancient and evil? The question remained unanswered, a chilling mystery that continued to haunt the town of Cold Pines. Hooper remained in the asylum. He never spoke of the void again. But sometimes late at night, nurses swore they heard him whisper. They said he spoke to someone, or something. And when they looked into his eyes, they saw a darkness there. A vast, empty darkness that stared back. The void, silent, waiting. And the town of Cold Pines would never forget the chilling possibility that it might whisper again.